Barcoo. A breath to spark the sparrow's fart. Hey there, family and friends, it's Mark Philpott here. Thank you so much for joining me today for episode 4 of the Barcoo podcast. So, on our daily bike rides or walks, generally we head down the road from our house across a small man-made wetlands area. It was created about 5 years ago and it's looking really nicely established. The recent rains have raised the water levels and it's transformed from a big damp hole in the ground to a flourishing natural environment. The various reeds and grasses are thriving and the water birds have made this wetlands into their home. Usually as we cross the little boardwalk through the wetlands, we take a few moments to stop and just watch the water birds, the wood ducks, the purple swamp hens that come swimming up to meet us in the hope of receiving a bit of a feed. But incidentally, we don't feed them because we've discovered that bread can actually ferment in their guts, causing bacterial infections, or settle to the bottom of the pond, causing the levels of bacteria to rise, which in turn can again kill the ducks. So it's funny, isn't it? But those grandmas you see with their grandkids feeding the ducks from their bags of stale bread are unwittingly causing harm to those poor little feathered creatures. So as a rule, we don't feed the ducks, but we do love stopping to have a look at them. And I think one of the simple pleasures in life is actually watching children around animals. Just watching them observe with wonder and curiosity all the odd shapes, sizes and behaviours, the diversity of peculiarities that are present. At least that's what I reckon the ducks are thinking as they watch our kids shuffling about, pointing and giggling. Nature is so diverse, and to a child whose experience of the world is relatively new, every interaction is filled with wonder and joy. Recently, on our daily walks, we've actually observed a different species of bird busily darting about on the muddy banks of the wetlands. From about the first day of spring, a flock of about 12 tiny little birds, barely larger than a common house mouse, with little red hats that look almost like tiny leather aviator helmets from the early 1900s, have settled in our wetlands. These tiny critters flap about like micro fighter jets, zigzagging on the breeze, their tiny bodies at the whim of the slightest breath of air, creating a playful flight path as they swoop and loop through the air. Their aerobatic air show caught our attention, and because they're new, we stopped to observe them. As we watched, we noticed the group moving between the water's edge and the eaves of a nearby house. Over the course of the week, we've continued to visit our little feathered friends, which we've dubbed the mud birds. And each day we stop to observe their activity and their progress as they've built some beautiful clay nests on the rendered wall of a nearby home. I don't know if the homeowners will be too rapt with these nests because they've come with a complimentary white paint job for the grey rendered wall beneath them. As we observe them busily building each day, I was reminded of a verse from the Gospel attributed to Matthew that refers to birds of the air, and it comes from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Basically, the crux of the message is, look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns. They don't worry about what tomorrow will bring, yet their every need is met. So instead of worrying, seek what is right and allow God to provide for all of your needs. And as I watched the birds, it really brought this message home for me. Just do what is right and your needs will be met. It sounds so simple. Do what's right and leave the provision business up to God or the universe. But letting go of worry to do what is right is easier said than done, and it raises a few questions about what is right. How do we know we're on the right path or investing our time and energy in the right activities? So humour me as I attempt to answer these questions with a little help from our friends, the mudbirds. The first part to discerning what is right, I believe, is developing an awareness of our own aptitude. Humans are one of very few species that have the capacity to make choices that don't serve our needs. Choices that don't honour the essence of our true nature. Choices that cause us more harm than good. We ignore our aptitude, our natural ability in favour of pursuing activities for extrinsic reasons. Humans do this both as individuals and on a societal level. In fact, we construct entire institutions that force mudbirds to live in dog kennels and dive for food at the bottom of murky lakes, instead of nurturing their innate abilities to catch insects in the air and build beautiful mud nests, to find their right path. Humans live in a world constantly barraged by the influence of people around us. Education, the media, filling our minds with clutter, telling us who we should be, what jobs we should do, what lifestyle we should be seeking. All this noise and clutter results in a dampening of our intuition, and we begin to lose touch with our natural abilities, our aptitude. And as we lose touch with ourselves and our natural abilities, the anxiety and the worry begins to build up. Mudbirds, on the other hand, know that they are mudbirds. They accept the way they were built. They fly like mudbirds and they build clay nests like all mudbirds do, to provide a safe place to nest and raise their family. They work with their aptitude and their natural ability. The mudbird doesn't look sideways at the duck and think, I should give that swimming thing a go and start foraging for bugs in the water instead of the air. The mudbird doesn't look sideways at the dog kennel in the backyard and think, that looks pretty good. Maybe instead of building a clay nest, I could pick up a few fence palings and make a kennel this season. Now, the mudbird just does what a mudbird's got to do. Building mud nests because that is what is at the core of their being, the essence of their nature. That is the highest expression of who they are, and in turn it provides exactly what they need. For a mudbird, knowing the right thing to do is easy. Once the mudbird nests were completed, I was quite impressed by their size given the tiny size of the birds themselves. By my estimates, each nest is approximately 200 mil wide, by about 150 mil tall, by about 20 mil thick. And I reckon that each of the tiny birds could probably carry about 3 to 4 millimeters cubed blob of mud in their beak on each trip, which works out to about 22,000 trips between the wetlands and the wall per nest. You split that between birds, that's about 11,000 trips each. Now this is quite curious, as Anders Ericsson, a psychologist responsible for developing the concept of deliberate practice, estimates that for a human to achieve mastery in any given skill, they require about 10,000 hours of carefully curated deliberate practice, which is a lot of hours for a human to dedicate to their craft. So I suppose it is possible, given enough aptitude and adequate resources, to achieve mastery in just about anything if we're to follow the science of deliberate practice. But aptitude alone is not enough. If we want to be on the right path, we need something else. I can't imagine it would be terribly rewarding spending 10,000 hours grinding away, or even a lifetime dedicated to a career or an activity that you just don't care about. It actually sounds quite torturous. For humans to find themselves on the right path, they must do what they have an aptitude for and also discover what they love. I asked the mudbirds if they loved what they do, but I couldn't make sense of their twitter. For humans, to discover their right action, to be on the right path, there must be love. There must be a resonance with our spirit on a deep level. It must be a pursuit that we believe in, an action that provides the canvas to express who we truly are. And when we find ourselves in that collision between aptitude and love, we experience a state of flow. As the psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi calls it, my goodness, how do you pronounce that name? Flow is the state of pure joy experienced when we find ourselves so focused and absorbed that by an activity that we completely lose sense of time, identity, and even awareness of our bodies. The learning and the repetition required to master the skill becomes a joyful experience, which is an experience preferable to the torturous experience of learning what we do not care about, which for me incidentally were topics like thermodynamics or anything chemistry related. This is important to observe Because when we find ourselves on the right path, dedicated to activity that both suits our aptitude and we love doing it, we start looking forward to the day and the work we get to do rather than dreading what we have to do. Rather than counting down the hours on the clock, crossing off the days of the week and weeks off the calendar, we start looking for opportunities to practice skills a little more. We dive a little deeper into our learning and find creative opportunities to express ourselves in our work. Over the years, as I've worked in secondary schools, I can't count the number of students who I've sat with that have no idea where their aptitude lies. Many also have a really hard time identifying the things that they love to do. Now, one way to look at this is that our school system actually does a pretty good job of preparing students for life with a very general knowledge across various disciplines. But especially at this time of year, as students are charged with the task of choosing their future study options for tertiary education, I can't help but wonder how well we're supporting our young people or older people in times of disruption and challenge to really seek their right path. Where do we create the space to let people's minds declutter, to tune into their intuition so that they might reignite their passion and love for activities, to tap into their aptitude and set people on the right path? Now imagine for a moment what the world would be like if every human knew themselves as well as the mudbirds know themselves. Living with a sense of purpose and freedom, focusing on what is right and trusting in the universe to provide for their every need. I wonder what we could do to take a step closer to that world in our own lives. I wonder what those steps would look like if we started to think this way in terms of the lives we want to cultivate for our children and our communities. So this week, I hope you have a great week as you ponder these ideas about aptitude and love, about finding yourself on the right path and helping others to find their way too. Thank you for joining me, Baku.